This week, the second trailer for Spider-Man No Way Home debuted, and the internet went absolutely insane. They went wild for the characters that were shown. They freaked out over the characters that weren't shown, and everyone is hyping this movie to the absolute max. And as excited as I am for all the returning characters, I actually see quite a few red flags with this movie. So today I'm going to give you 5 reasons that Spider-Man No Way Home might disappoint us. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know your excitement level for Spider-Man No Way Home. Are you one of the millions of fanboys out there that are just absolutely loving everything being revealed and leaked about this film? Are you someone a little bit more like me that you're excited for the fan service, but you're kind of nervous about some of the stuff surrounding this film? I would love to hear your take down below in the comment section. And just to preface this as we go into this, I'm absolutely not a hater. I love the Spider-Man franchise. I've thoroughly enjoyed Tom Holland as the character. I do have some of my issues with the fact that they won't let Tom Holland have a traditional story. And to be perfectly clear, I hope the movie proves me wrong about all of my concerns. I would absolutely love that, but at the moment, as excited as I am to see some familiar faces, I just see a lot of concerning elements about the production for this film, as well as what they've revealed in the trailers. That's what I'm going to talk about in this video, and let's get started. Reason number 1, this movie had a rocky start. What I mean by that, you gotta remember in August 2019, Sony and Disney Marvel broke up. Ma and Pa weren't getting along until they moved into 2 separate houses, and apparently Tom went to go and talk to each of the 2 sides, convinced Dad to move back in at least long enough for this movie to get made. And in and of itself, rocky trouble doesn't immediately mean rocky start doesn't immediately mean that the movie is in trouble. But in light of the rest of the things on this list, it starts to turn into a much bigger concern in light of the timeline under which they wanted to create this film. Which will lead us to number 2. Rushed production. Sony originally wanted this movie to come out in July of this year, which would be a 2-year turnaround since Spider-Man Far From Home, which sometimes that works. Far From Home came out 2 years after Homecoming. Spider-Man 2 came out 2 years after Spider-Man 2002. So you can do a 2-year turnaround on a big blockbuster and have it work. But when you do that, you just have absolutely no margin for if something goes wrong. You just kind of have to commit to whatever plan you have and go with it and charge towards a release date. And that's what this felt like to me, is that they decided they want to put out Spider-Man movies every 2 years, in which case that means we get a new one in 2021, even though Ma and Pa broke up. They wanted to do this complex story about multiverse that has Doctor Strange in it, but 2 months after Far From Home, Sony and Disney Marvel were broken up. And then a month after that, they finally get back together, in which case, at that point in time, you can start writing your script that's Doctor Strange-centric. Like, that's just not a lot of time to do this incorporated story with characters coming over, tying into a grander mythology, setting things up while telling a complex story where you're pulling in characters from multiple different timelines involving the multiverse. That is a short turnaround for a 2-year run on the movie. Now, it did get pushed back 6 months. Thank goodness. But that's because of COVID. Like, we haven't even started talking about the fact that a global pandemic screwed up all movie release schedules, timelines, things like that. If Sony had their way, this movie would have come out 5 months ago. Even though just 2 years and 2 months ago, Marvel and Sony weren't talking to each other anymore. And that's just a rushed production where it feels like they started out with the goal of a release date rather than trying to have a great script. We'll get more to that as we get into this. My third big concern, it feels like this movie is focusing in on the gimmick rather than the story. All of the chatter from the fans, all the discussion about the casting and everything revolves around which old characters are going to show up and when are we first going to see them. Everything that the fans are freaking out about, everything that the fans are excited about, ties back to just seeing familiar faces, except in the MCU universe. It's all the multiverse gimmick, and no one is talking about their excitement level for the specific plot that's kind of going on here. And that just has me very concerned, especially like in kind of talking with people over the last couple of days since the trailer dropped in my comment section on Twitter and my DMs on Instagram. And I voiced the simple version of my concerns in my trailer reaction, and a bunch of people like, I don't understand. What are you not excited about? This movie's going to be awesome. It has Doc Ock. It has Green Goblin. We're probably maybe seeing some other Spider-Man in it. Perhaps a certain blind lawyer is going to show up. How could it not be awesome? Well, having a bunch of familiar faces showing up doesn't make something awesome. It just doesn't. It's fun. I'll freak out for the fan service, but that's called fan service. And you don't have an awesome movie just because of fan service. And I had people messaging me like, you loved Endgame. Why aren't you excited for this? This is the Endgame of Spider-Man movies. Well, Endgame was the Endgame of Marvel movies because they spent 11 years, 22 movies building up to earn all the fan service that was in the third act. There was things that were just set up 10 years earlier, 5 years earlier that paved the way to earn those moments. It wasn't just, you didn't show up because it was fan service. You showed up because you wanted to see how they were going to defeat Thanos. This movie, people are only interested in. This movie is being sold based around, hey, look, it's Doc Ock. When are we going to get to see Toby? And building on what I just said, my next concern, I do not like the basic setup for this movie that they've established in the trailers. Am I excited to get to see all these faces show up in a Tom Holland movie? Absolutely I am. The reason established in the trailers for why it's happening, I am not feeling it at all. When the plot of your movie is basically Spider-Man is really bummed out because life is stressful. Therefore, he goes to Doctor Strange, who's wearing a sweater. His house is filled with snow. He's drinking from a goofy coffee mug. He's winking at the camera. He's ignoring wisdom from other people to go cast a spell based off the whims of a high schooler that's bummed out. Immediately I go, that's not super compelling. And I get it. In the comics, the character Doctor Strange is established to be irresponsible, arrogant. Gotcha. That's not the same thing as a grown-up indulging the whims of a child. That's like next level just stupid to do that, especially when other people are like, dude, don't do that. Like, no, I'm going to do it anyway because I'm Doctor Strange and I just want to see if I can, so I'm going to do wacky, stupid stuff for a child. That brings pretty hollow to me. But even more so, the premise of this movie is that Doctor Strange screwed up a spell because Peter Parker wouldn't shut up. Why are we going to get to see Doc Ock? Because Peter Parker wouldn't shut up while Doctor Strange was casting a spell. That is not interesting. It's not compelling. It feels like a very lazy way to get where this movie is going. People go, well, it comes out of the comics. Like, but we can go and pick up a stack of comics and find hundreds, thousands of terrible story arcs. They're not all good enough to be movies. They're not all great ideas. And also sometimes what works in a comic doesn't translate to a film. And if the reason in the comics it played out was like, yeah, Peter Parker just wouldn't shut up, that's not the best way to get to multiverse crossovers and things like that. There's better explanations, better ways to make it happen than something like that. Just feels like such a lazy excuse to do something that should be so awesome and epic. And it's tough for me to get excited about something such a mundane explanation for what happened. And finally, this movie was simply not a good production, and the quotes that Tom Holland is giving about how this movie was being put together at the last minute just reaffirm all of my big concerns that I said in my first 2 points. GQ published an interview with Tom Holland today, and here's a paragraph from the article. The production of No Way Home sounds like total chaos. As the first day of filming approached, several key actors hadn't signed on yet. And then it starts quoting Tom Holland. Some people were trying to figure out whether they wanted to do it, and we needed all of them or none. Holland says the movie was reportedly going to be released after the upcoming Doctor Strange sequel, but when that film was delayed by COVID, it was decided that No Way Home would go first, requiring changes to the plot. Even once filming was underway, the script was being rewritten on an almost daily basis. You could ask the director, what happens in the third act? And his response would be, I'm still trying to figure it out, Holland says. So right there, you have 3 big, gigantic red flags. The first one, they started filming before they'd signed on all the people that needed to be signed on for the film. You're doing this multiverse movie where you're bringing in characters from all of these different timelines, and they just were sprinting towards that goal, that movie, and they didn't even know if everyone would be in the film. Not the best strategy, but that's what you have to do if your goal is to hit a release date rather than to make a great movie. Second, enormous concern, this movie was supposed to come out before Doctor Strange 2. Doctor Strange is obviously a major part of this film. This movie clearly has multiverse. That movie has multiverse in the title, and they had to rework this movie in order to set it before that film. They had to rework the plot mid-production. Once again, if your goal is to make a great film, you just say, oh, if you're delaying your movie, we'll delay our movie. But if your goal is to hit a release date and get it out as quick as possible, suddenly you go, let's juggle the plot around. We can rework it a little bit, move some things around. No worries whatsoever. That's kind of alarming. Third one in here, Tom Holland basically admits, you'd ask the director, how does the movie end? And be like, yeah, we're still trying to figure that out. Now, there's no shortage of classic films that were being rewritten day to day on set. It's not terribly uncommon in Hollywood, but it's obviously not the best way to do things. And the more complex your film is, the more difficult it is to do that. So if you're trying to follow up this plot line from Far From Home while going multiverse, while bringing in Doctor Strange, while reshuffling which movie comes first, while hopefully having a big gigantic payoff with all these different characters, that's a lot of moving parts. That's complicated in and of itself to try and tell a compelling story that's multiverse. But trying to write it on the set where you don't even know what you're working towards, what your finale is, it's kind of tough to have a cohesive film under those situations with so many moving parts. So to me, given the specific nature of this film and the reasons why everything is so last minute, that feels like big, gigantic red flags to me. And then Holland gives a specific example of when he disagreed with what was in the script. He says this, anyway, the day finally came to shoot the big finale, then starts quoting him, the crescendo scene, like this is really happening, it's crazy, only it wasn't working. I kept stopping and being like, I'm sorry, I just don't believe what I'm saying. The director, John Watts, took him aside and Holland told him, it wasn't me. The scene was wrong. We sat down and we went through it and we came up with a new idea, Holland says. Then we pitched it to the writers, they rewrote it, and it works great. Once again, there are plenty of examples in cinematic history where this sort of thing has happened and it worked out fine. But it's certainly not the best way to do things when your lead actor fundamentally disagrees with the ending that the writers and director wrote. And so on set, you're having to rework the whole crescendo of the movie in the moment. it just doesn't seem like the best production. And when you put this all together, where you have a studio that really wants to hit a release date, and that's their primary concern, despite the fact that they broke up with Disney Marvel, despite a pandemic, despite the movie that's supposed to follow, or movie supposed to come before it getting delayed, despite them not getting everybody signed on in time, despite them not having a script they're happy with, they're still charging towards that release date. That's why I'm concerned. It just doesn't, all that feels like red flags. Am I excited to see Doc Ock again? I rewatched Spider-Man 2 last night. Of course I want to see Alfred Molina one more time as Doc Ock. Of course I want to see Willem Dafoe one more time as Green Goblin. And if we get these Spider-Men, if we get this blind lawyer showing up, of course I'm going to freak out just like everybody else. But I want it to be earned. I want the movie to be as good as those moments. And what they've shown me in the trailers and the stories I'm hearing from production don't convince me that that's the case. I think this is going to be a fan service movie that I'm going to have fun with, but I don't think it's a great movie that's going to have a compelling story. I would love to be wrong. I would love for the movie to win me over and have it as my #1 Spider-Man movie of all time. I would love that. But I'm not feeling that's going to happen at this particular moment. Join me down below in the comment section. Let me know what you thought about it. Check out my Spider-Man content right over there if you want my rankings. See my Spider-Man movie reviews right down there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.